Coming up on this episode, mixed news on the injury front for the Warriors as they prepare to take on the Pelicans in back-to-back games. I'll tell you what I think Steve Kerr should be doing with the starting lineup and the rotation in the absence of Stephen Curry. Welcome back to the Golden State with Mates podcast. Recording this at halftime of the Lakers-Suns matchup. You probably won't be listening or watching to this until after the game. Currently, a very interesting battle. The Lakers jumped out to, I think, an 18-point lead early in the first quarter. The Suns have come all the way back to take a 2-point lead at halftime. So it should be a fascinating second half. We are also 24 hours removed from the Golden State Warriors' first defeat of the season in their home opener against the LA Clippers, a 112-104 loss on Sunday, and since then, in the past 24 hours, we've received an update on superstar guard Stephen Curry, who, of course, left the game on Sunday after turning his ankle twice, initially late in the third quarter, and then 5 seconds after he re-entered in the fourth quarter. Did it again and hobbled off and down the tunnel into the locker room and wasn't to be seen again. This update from the Warriors early on Monday, a pretty good result, you'd have to say, for Golden State and Steph Curry, with no ligament damage by the sounds of it. He's been ruled out for his upcoming back-to-back on Tuesday and Wednesday against the New Orleans Pelicans. Will be reevaluated on Friday ahead of the start of a 5-game road trip against the Houston Rockets on Saturday. And then I think after that, the Warriors have the Pistons, and then in no particular order, I think it's like Boston, Cleveland, Oklahoma City, or something along those lines. I know it's those teams. So it sounds like Steph could be back, if not for the start of the road trip, maybe the end of the road trip, which is obviously going to be crucial with those three matchups, specifically with Cleveland, Boston, Oklahoma City. They're going to be three very difficult games for the Warriors and almost impossible, you'd have to imagine, if there's no Steph Curry. So based on what I saw yesterday, again, I'm not a doctor. It didn't look great, but I think this is a pretty good result in terms of only being out so far, confirmed 2 games, no ligament damage. So I think that's a good result for Steph. There is a bit of mixed injury news. If we think that the Steph diagnosis or prognosis is a good result, it's disappointing that De'Anthony Melton will also be out for the next 2 games after straining his back. And that's a concern because we know he missed so much time last season, was limited to 38 games with a back issue. So for that to be a reoccurrence here, hopefully it's just a minor thing. Again, he'll be reevaluated on Friday before the road trip as well. But that's a worry for Golden State because now, yes, you've got your depth, but you've lost the player you could most ill afford to lose in Steph Curry, obviously, really the only player you could not afford to lose. And then you've also lost a potential backup there to him in De'Anthony Melton, who's played well for the Warriors so far and has figured as a key part of the rotation. So, yeah, not great, not ideal, and it's going to put significant pressure on a number of players and the Warriors' depth going into these back-to-back games against the Pelicans. Andrew Wiggins is also questionable for tomorrow's game. We just have to hope that he plays because if he's out as well, then we've got real concerns, obviously, coming off a 29-point, 11 of 15 shooting. Excellent performance against the Clippers on Sunday. The Warriors are going to need Andrew Wiggins. They're going to need his best offensively to try and prop up this offense without Steph, which could be really, really difficult. What would I do without Steph, without De'Anthony Melton? Obviously, there's still plenty of options for Steve to go to, and there's no replacing Steph Curry, but you're going to have to try and do it by committee, and you're going to have to do it in a few different ways. And I don't think it's as simple as, hey, Brandon Pajemski, you're now the starting point guard, and away we go, and we just do it that way. I think the Warriors are going to have to change up their lineup a little bit. And if there's one silver lining to the Steph injury here, I think it's the fact that they actually play the Pelicans. Now, yes, you would have preferred to come up against maybe a couple of bad teams who you'd be more of a chance against. But with the Pelicans, a huge storyline for them over the offseason has been their complete lack of genuine center options. They lost Jonas Valanciunas to the Washington Wizards, and they didn't really bring in anyone else aside from Daniel Theis, who is a bit of an NBA journeyman, been around the league, probably most notably with the Celtics previously, hasn't had too much of an impact in the NBA over recent seasons. but he's with the Pelicans and he's now starting alongside Zion Williamson in the front court. So 6'6" Zion, 6'8" Daniel Tice. And then off the bench, they've got this Messi kid who's been really good for them. He's averaging like 21 minutes a game, over 8 points, over 5 rebounds, blocking some shots. He's 7 foot, so he does have some genuine size there, which could concern the Warriors. But in that Tice-Messi combination, the Warriors should get a bit of a reprieve compared to what we saw on Sunday when they got absolutely obliterated by Ivica Zubac, who went for 23, 17, and 6 assists and absolutely dominated that game, was the player of the game for mine. Overall, in general, and obviously the Clippers getting that 8-point win, Zubac was huge. So the Warriors should get a bit of a reprieve, albeit Zion, we know how much of a force he is in the paint and at the rim, and the Warriors are going to have to contend with that. But not having to come up against the offensive talent of a 7-footer like a Zubac or a number of others around the league, I think it is a silver lining that the Warriors are coming up against the Pelicans. Now, what has that got to do with Steph Curry's injury? Steph Curry's a guard. Why are we talking about big men? Well, I think, as I said before, the Warriors need to change their lineup here. And playing against the Pelicans should allow you to actually go smaller and get away with it in comparison to if you're playing the Clippers again and you're coming up against Zubac, or you're playing the Nuggets with Jokic, or the Timberwolves with Rudy Gobert, albeit that's a little bit different. He's not offensively talented at all. But there's plenty of centers around the league, like Wemby. I don't know. Pick what you want. Embiid, whatever else. Like there's plenty of talented 7-footers around the league, which are going to give the Warriors a lot of work to do across the course of the season. But the Pelicans don't particularly have one right now, and that should allow them and should make it more viable for them to go smaller and try and play a bit differently. And going smaller allows them to get some more shooting on the floor and try and replace the production and the shooting that you're losing in Steph Curry. Now, you're not going to do that necessarily, but you can try. And I think going small is going to be their best pathway, best avenue to doing that. I would obviously have Pods. Like, he's clearly got to replace Steph. There's no... Melton was the alternative option there. You can't go there now because he's also out. So it's got to be Pods in the starting lineup. I'd probably put out Trace Jackson-Davis, so I'd have Wiggs, Kuminga, Draymond front court and start Draymond at center and say to Draymond, look, while Steph's out, we just need more shooting on the floor. Against the Pelicans, then we can afford to go slightly smaller, albeit they've still got Zion. Their center combination allows us to do that. We're going to start you at center for a couple of games here, or at least see what happens in the first night of the back-to-back. And then that allows you TJD out, and probably either, if you really want the shooting, it's Buddy Hield. I would probably look to Moses because I think that gives you a little bit more versatility, but it still gives you the 3-point shooting. Slide him in, have Pods, Moody, Wiggs, JK, Draymond as your starting 5. Now, there's plenty of other ways Steve could go. Could he continue tall and start TJD still and take Kuminga out and say, okay, we need Moody or Buddy Hield here for Kuminga, and then that gives us some extra shooting as well. I wouldn't necessarily do that because I think with Steph out, I think Kuminga's scoring, like, there's some pressure on him here. He's averaging 8 points a game through the first 3 appearances so far this season. We expected, after he averaged over 18 points on over 54% shooting in the second half of last season, we expected him to be at least at that mark again, if not early 20s, right? Particularly given we know the contract situation and the fact he's going to be a restricted free agent next off-season. He's looking for a big deal. Right now, the fact the Warriors didn't sign him to a $150 million deal looks good based on the first 3 games. So the pressure is going to be on him, right, to try and take on some of the scoring load. And I think it's also, as I kind of spoke a little bit about on yesterday's episode after the game, I think it's on Steve a little bit and on Terry Stotts as the offensive coordinator to try and cater things a little bit more to Kuminga and Wiggins and these athletes who are really, should be your second and third leading scorers behind Steph. And now without Steph, should be your top 2 leading scorers. You need to change your offense to try and prioritize those guys rather than saying, well, even though we've lost Steph, we're still going to go huge on the 3 ball and we're really going to emphasize that. No, like, you need to be willing to adapt. And so that's what I'm looking forward to. Can they get Kuminga more involved? than him simply being a catch and shoot threat, which is not his go. Hopefully he can start knocking down some jump shots and making defenses respect him there, but he needs to get back to doing what he does best, which is getting to the rim and attacking. So that's why I would keep him in the starting lineup. I'd push him to the 4, push Draymond to the 5, push Wiggins to the 3, bring in Buddy or Moses Moody, and that will hopefully continue to spread the floor out a little bit and make sure that your offense is still pretty good while not conceding too much defensively, because you are going up against, the center spot. You're going up against Daniel Tice and, the Messi kid, who has looked really good and he's 7 foot, but is he going to take advantage of pick and roll scenarios and going to the rim? I'm waiting to see. Like a lot of the buckets I've seen from him so far are kind of putbacks or, getting an offensive rebound here or there, or there's not too much in the way of, okay, you're going to go to this guy in the post and he's going to post up Draymond Green every possession. Like we saw a bit with Zubac yesterday, where Zubac does actually have the ability and the talent to post up and take advantage of mismatches. I'm not sure Tice or Messi are going to do that. So I think you can go smaller against the Pelicans, and the fact they are playing the Pelicans, yeah, you would have preferred to play the Trailblazers again or the Jazz again or one of the bad teams in the Eastern Conference. But the fact you're coming up against a team that's noted for not having too much size, I think it's good timing for the Warriors, albeit you never want to see Steph Curry on the sidelines. So that's what I would do. I'd be really, really surprised if Steve just said, okay, Pods, you're in, and we're going to still start Wiggins, Kuminga, Draymond, Trace. I just don't then there's just no shooting out there. There just really isn't. And you have to have something. I'd probably keep Buddy in the bench role and say, okay, it really worked over the first 2 games. You're this microwave scorer off the bench that we need, and keep him in that role and still have him play 20, 25 plus minutes. It's going to be interesting to see how many guys Steve uses. So he's kind of spoken about, he hasn't confirmed his starting lineup at all. He's kind of spoken about, the different options in terms of replacing Steph as a ball handler. Pods is obviously, number 1 in terms of replacing that. Draymond is also going to be a point forward. Kyle Anderson, you'd expect to come back into the mix a bit more and actually handle the ball a bit and do a bit of playmaking. So sounds like Pat Spencer as well is also going to be suited up. The 3 two-way contracted guys haven't been active in each of the first 3 games. I'd expect that to change. Going by the injury report, none of them are on the injury report, which suggests that they're all going to be active for this game against the Pelicans, which makes some sense given that Melton and Steph are out and that Wiggins is also questionable. That doesn't mean we're going to see Quentin Post or Reece Beekman, but Steve did specify Pat Spencer as a potential option as a backup point guard. I'd be surprised if Steve went to that. If Steve went to that, we're kind of really clutching at straws here and struggling a little bit. I prefer Pods and then try and make up the rest of it with Draymond and Slow-Mo, really. Like, I'd probably just be playing Pods heavy minutes, and I'm not sure fans are necessarily going to like that, because I think most of us have been somewhat disappointed with what Pods has done so far, particularly when it comes to scoring the ball and shooting the ball. And obviously, when you're replacing Steph as that backup point guard, not only are you coming in to be the ball handler and the playmaker, get guys good looks, but you need to be scoring and shooting the ball a little bit yourself, and that's what Pods hasn't done so far. He's missing a lot of 3-point attempts. The scoring doesn't look great. So can he turn that around? It would be a perfect time for him to do so. It would be a perfect time for Kuminga to turn things around. Maybe it's good timing in that aspect. Maybe those guys are due for a regression to the mean in terms of their scoring and their shooting percentages, and that will come over these 2 games against the Pelicans potentially. We'll see what Wiggins can do. Obviously, the Warriors are going to lean heavily on him, but he's playing well anyway. I do wonder, like, he goes 29 points on Sunday against the Clippers. Like, how much more can he give you than that? Like, yes, he could shoot the ball more. He went 11 of 15, but he's probably going to shoot the ball a bit more and be less efficient. He may still end up with 25, 30 points. Is that going to be enough, or it's probably dependent on what happens outside of him in regards to Podziemski and Kuminga, and whether Buddy Hield can shake off that bad shooting performance on Sunday against the Pelicans, 3 of 14, 1 of 9 from 3. If he can bounce back from that with a game more similar to what we saw in the first 2 outings when, of course, he was so explosive. So The other thing as well with the shooting aspect is obviously you're losing the greatest shooter of all time, Buddy Hield. As I said, he's still going to have a significant role in that. Does Lindy Waters the third come into the mix still? I found it really interesting that before yesterday's game, before any of these injuries even occurred, Steve was asked about Lindy Waters, obviously the 13th man out of the rotation at the moment, and he said, "Look, I'd be comfortable starting the guy. Seriously, I would. I'd be comfortable starting the guy," which is kind of crazy that Steve would be willing to start, that he's got a 13th man that he'd be willing to start if necessarily. But it does go to show you the Golden State roster, the kind of lack of hierarchy. We know the depth. And it goes to show you, like with the shooting as well, now losing Steph, maybe I'm not saying Lindy Waters III is going to start, albeit, like if it's not Buddy Hield, if it's not Moses Moody, could you start Lindy Waters III? Like he'd actually be my third option, simply because you need the shooting, and I think he's the third best shooter on your roster behind Steph and Buddy Hield. Could he start? I don't think so, but I do think he should be part of the rotation mix. Now, does that mean Steve goes 11 deep? I would think he has to go 10, and you know what? If I'm starting Draymond at center, I might just bench either Trace or you're probably going to have to bench Trace almost, which is, I don't know. I'm just trying to think out loud here, but if you're starting Draymond and you only want to go 10 deep and Lindy Waters is part of that 10, then it's either going to have to be Looney, Anderson, or Jackson Davis. You cannot bench Loon after what he did yesterday and what he's done in general over the first 3 games. I don't think you'll be able to bench Anderson again. We know he was kind of the first casualty of that 12-man rotation being benched for the entire second half of yesterday's game. I don't think you can do that because you're actually going to need his ball handling and playmaking a little bit. Is Trace the odd man out? Now, that probably, that might come down to how Zion is playing and whether he's a real force at the rim and you need someone who's, a bit more of a shot-blocking threat, and Trace is the best shot-blocking threat the Warriors have. So I'm not saying that TJD will get a DNP by any means, but I think the Warriors do need to utilize Lindy Waters III, and to do that, they'll again have to go 11 deep, or they're going to have to get rid of one of their bigs, which may happen if Draymond is the starting center, which I'm advocating for. So that's going to be fascinating. Because there's not too many guys, like when Slow-Mo gets a DNP in the second half yesterday, you think, whoa, I thought he was playing okay. Like, what's going on here? But that's we're going to see some shocks in the rotation when guys, would it shock me if Trace Jackson Davis was played less than 10 minutes tomorrow? No, it wouldn't. But for many, it would, because before Sunday's game, he'd had a few games in a row dating back to the preseason where he was really, really good. Against the Jazz, he had a double, I think he had a double-double, didn't he? Or against the Trailblazers, he had a double-double in one of the first 2 games of the season in less than 20 minutes. So he's been good until Sunday's game, and I just don't know where Steve's going to go in terms of that big rotation if they do decide to go small with Draymond at center. Just in terms of the Pelicans, they are missing both DeJounte Murray, who broke his hand in the season opener, I think, and also Trey Murphy, who's out with a hamstring injury. Of course, he just signed that 4-year, $112 million extension. They will also enter the game with a 2-1 record, but having lost their previous outing, having lost to the Trailblazers by 22 on Sunday. So that's a disappointing loss for them, which came after a 2-point win over Portland, and I think they might have beat Chicago or Atlanta in the season opener. I'd have to go back and check that. So they haven't really faced great opposition. They haven't played overly well necessarily. So I think the Warriors do have a chance to win this game. I'm just going to check what the line is, because I forgot to check before I even jumped on here. Just going to check. Yeah, so the Pelicans are currently 3.5-point favorites, which I think is fair enough. I think that's fair enough, but I do think the Warriors are still a chance to win this game. I think trying to keep Zion quiet and CJ McCollum, they're the 2 guys. I don't know. I feel like CJ's going to have a big game. I'm feeling it. I don't know why, but I just feel like obviously without Trey Murphy and without DeJounte, CJ getting a bit more offensive usage. Just obviously got Brandon Ingram, who I forgot about there as well. So they've got some real offensive talent. Got some defensive guys there in Herb Jones, Jose Alvarado, these types. So they're a good team, and they're going to be a tough beat tomorrow, I would have thought, for a Warriors team, particularly without Steph. So it's going to be difficult. Can the Warriors... I mean, they need to try and win one of these two games, I think. I think they really need to try and get one of these two games. And there's a lot of focuses tomorrow on, I think, three players in particular. Podziemski, in terms of replacing Steph as that backup point. Kuminga, we need your scoring. Like, we didn't need it the first two games. We desperately need it now. And Draymond just had an off game against the Clippers, needs to bounce back. And there's kind of been this notion that, oh, well, when Steph's out, Draymond's kind of also out because he doesn't try as hard when Steph's not there. I don't think that's true. I think that's a notion that was kind of born when Steph was out for so long in the 19-20 season after he broke his hand, and that was just a wasted season, really. I mean, it turned out to be wasted because they got a top pick out of it, and they wasted that on James Wiseman. So just shout out to James Wiseman after tearing his Achilles as well. Good luck to him in his recovery. And shout out to Taylor Hendricks, who that was horrific. I was watching that live, the Mavericks Jazz game, and he just went down. I thought, oh, he might have just turned his ankle like Steph did yesterday. And then, like, they don't show it on the broadcast. They start talking about it like it's a really gruesome injury. And then the stretcher comes out, and I'm like, what is going on here? And I looked it up on Twitter. I refuse to watch the replay of it because I just hate stuff like that, like gruesome injuries. I don't like it at all. But prayers up, James Wiseman, Taylor Hendricks, anyone else going through significant injuries at the moment. I lost my train of thought. I don't even know where where I was going before. But hopefully the Warriors can get a win over the Pelicans tomorrow. They need to win one of the two games, I think. Try and get themselves to at least 3-2, and then reevaluate from there once we hear an update on Steph and De'Anthony Melton come Friday. I'll finish it up there. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, that'd be greatly appreciated. You can follow me at POC252. That's POK252 on X/Twitter. Also on Instagram and TikTok, Golden State with Mates. You can check out clips there. And other than that, I'll probably do a post-game live after tomorrow. Fingers crossed it's a bit more positive than what we saw yesterday.